Bye 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 bye
Bye bye
bye.
bye
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 bye bye
bye
bye
bye
bye
bye.
bye.
Hello, Jody Raynsford. Hello, do batters.
Hello, David Hellard. I think we need to preface this episode just to see what happens, just by knowing that this has been recorded a few hours after England's victory against Iran, and I believe some of us have spent time in a pub, and while some of us were working.
I mean, some of us are working in a pub. Is how we're positioning it. Depending on
When you
who's
go to
listening.
the when you go to the pub, like for the football, do you take like some caffeine bullet with you? Notice how I used like caffeine bullet as a plural there. Do you take some caffeine bullet with you? Take caffeine bullet with you in order to use it as an opportunity to keep people going, or do you keep it strictly business and personal separate?
I always run out of caffeine bullet no matter where I go because actually we don't hold it here. So oh, we've got Jack coming. We're going to the episode. Brilliant. So, do batters, our next guest. Honestly, I'd never heard of Jack a year ago, and then he's turned up with no respect for anyone and just started destroying long-held records. It's exactly what I'd have done if I was any good, but I'm not. So, welcome to the podcast, the wonderful Jack Kuenzle.
Whoa.
How you doing?
Hey, fantastic. Doing pretty good.
Just as a little bit of a warning, I have been watching England play football earlier today and had about 5 or 6 pints. So I might be a bit more fruity than I'd normally be.
The questions may get inappropriate as we go on. So just,
that's fine.
Where have you come
I'm an
from?
open book.
Bring us up to speed on before you started smashing records.
Wow. Yeah. I don't even know. I think basically it's just I just really enjoy the training, and it's nice. It seems stupid to like want to desire something more, but it's just nice to like it just makes the training way more enjoyable. And so it's just nice to have something to kind of go after. So the Bob is like the
training though leads to something. Like you normally like is it just the experience of training, or are you trying to get faster, or is there a bigger thing you're building towards?
Yeah, no, certainly. Yeah. I think getting faster is a lot of, I mean, why I enjoy training is probably getting faster is a part of it. I think I do what I've found in the past is it does have to be like kind of like have some adventure to it or be stimulating mentally in some way for me. So like last winter, I was like training a lot, like near Lake Tahoe, and I was just like lapping the same like backcountry ski areas, just like dozens of times. And after a while, like I couldn't take it anymore, even though it was like the best physical training for me to be doing. Like I had to go, and I went down to the east side in the Sierra, and I was like skiing some like 11,000 to 14,000 foot peaks, and it was just like the training wasn't as quality, but it was just like I need that kind of like that adventure and that extra stimulus. So like I'm here in Boulder, and like I came here specifically to like get better at like scrambling because I'm like really I'm kind of scared of heights. I'm getting better now, but yeah. So,
and am I right in thinking you were a Marine before?
I was in the Navy.
In the Navy? Oh, in the Navy. I did not know that.
Yeah.
So I didn't think you had to be fit in the Navy.
Depending on your job, yeah. Some jobs you don't have to be terribly fit, and honestly, that like used to bother me a little bit, but like it doesn't fucking matter. Like it doesn't really matter like how many push-ups you can do when you're just it's like a mental game now. Like if it comes down to your physical fitness, something has gone like so horrifically wrong that yeah.
So what was when you were in the Navy then, what was your relationship with exercise and with running?
Yeah, so I was in the Navy. I was a SEAL in the Navy, so like the US equivalent of the SBS, and it was like I had to train a lot for that. And in the end, I think I ended up liking the training I was doing a little bit more than the actual job. So it was like I enjoyed the training to get there more than I enjoyed the actual job, I think, in some ways. And so I kind of, I mean, sometimes it wasn't the best because like I definitely could have been better at my job. there were times I could have been better at my job if I wasn't running so much.
What,
Well,
what exactly does that mean as a Navy SEAL? I could have been better at my job.
Like your colleagues
when
were
you're
being
not very
shot
good at
up
your job as a
behind
Navy
you.
SEAL, what happens? Like,
I just mean like you can always be like better. I mean, I was never in combat or anything, so certainly there's a context where being worse at your job, means you're killed. But no, I'm trying to think of some concrete examples. I mean, you always can be better, physically and mentally at that. And I just chose to focus more on the running and stuff than all the different tactical tasks that a SEAL kind of has and trains towards. So yeah.
What does a SEAL? So if you're not in combat, I mean, like, I haven't got a clue.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what do you do when you're not in combat? Like, what is the what?
Yeah.
Where do you spend your time?
So to be completely honest, like I only know of the guys I went through training with, the guys I went through basic training with, I only know a couple of them when I was in that were actually in combat. I mean, it was just only, maybe, 5% of them, just because, it's just the way the world kind of was when I was in. And it was just, kind of just random kind of luck, who was kind of in it and who wasn't. And so, I mean, there's a whole host of mission sets, and a lot of it is just, there's presence stuff they do. There's lots of like foreign training they conduct. So that's like training with partner militaries. That's, that's training with partner militaries, like peer militaries, like in Europe, or, training like forces like in, I don't know, Africa and Asia that don't have the same skill set and, resources that, US military does or European militaries do. A lot of that there is, and then there's some sort of, there's other stuff that they do.
Well, who's the most shambolic military that you've ever done partner military things with?
I don't even know that word, shambolic.
Well, I mean, like lowest of the wrong, shall we say? Like, when you
least organized,
least organized,
least
a bit chaotic. You're like, oh my god, like these guys need more than a little bit of training.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I want to say,
Can we
I mean, you can
countries
imagine. I don't even know like what I'm authorized to say. So, but I mean, you can imagine the countries with like the least resources, generally don't have the most effective fighting force, so.
And I'd say actually of all of the American special forces, the Navy SEALs is probably the one that in the UK we know most about the kind of selection, the how they operate, and for some reason
because it's Charlie Sheen popularized the Navy SEAL season as well. So, and if he can make it to the Navy SEALs, anyone can.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, I mean, I think, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's a reflection of guys like me coming on podcasts and like, talking about this shit, which like isn't always good. And that's also a reflection of like, the SEALs honestly just by chance happened to be the unit. I mean, not really by chance, but there was more that went into it, but there were other units that could have probably conducted that mission that killed bin Laden. And, they received a lot of fame from that. I mean, they are amongst the, the best in the world at what they do. So certainly a lot of that fame is well deserved.
And what is because is it called Dubs Week, or there's a term?
Hell Week.
Oh, it is Hell Week. Oh, so what is that actually like to go through?
It's probably the worst. It's one of the worst things you can possibly do. It's pretty awful. Just because, I mean, for me, to be completely honest, there were other parts of the training that were worse for me. For me, like that was, just like, it's like similar to like running an ultra or anything else. But it's just like goes on for a week. And it's harder because like a lot of it isn't in your control. So you don't really know what's about to happen to you. So in some ways it's easier because you're not constantly putting out like maximizing your potential the entire week. But in other ways, like you're not in control of what's happening to you. And it's not, it's only a certain degree of it is physical. A lot of it is just mental, just, a lot of like cold water exposure and obviously sleep deprivation. So, it's a pretty horrendous experience.
And when you're going through that, how much of your conscious is actually focusing on putting everything into what you're doing, and how much is actually trying to almost play the system and to think, actually, I need to be conserving my energy. Am I looking like I'm doing enough without giving everything? And like, how much are you balancing that?
No, that's a great question. And I mean, I think it's tricky. Like I always tried, like my whole thing was like I tried to treat like the whole thing like a competition. Because that for me, I'm just a competitive person, and that for me like took a lot of the, if you're just focused on just like surviving and doing the minimum, I think you've got like nothing to fall back on. You know what I mean? Like if you're trying to compete, then it's like, okay, this is getting really hard. Then I can just survive for just today. But if you're just trying to survive the whole time, that's what I always tell people is like always treat like the whole thing like a competition. Like if you're trying to like conserve your energy and play the games and everything, I mean, tons of people do that. I would think that would be mentally a little bit harder. And a lot of it is subjective. The instructors are running it, or evaluating you subjectively. And if you are trying, you know, if you're trying hard, they can tell, and then maybe they'll go a little bit easier on you. And whereas there are some guys who are intentionally dragging the whole time because they're just trying to put out the absolute minimum. They get the most attention from the instructor staff. So there's kind of like different ways you can kind of treat it.
And what was worse than Hell Week then, in your mind, in terms of what you?
Well, it's a little bit tricky because sometimes when I do a race, I mean, whenever I do something, I always think like, okay, like this last thing that I just did, that was the worst thing I've ever done. It's like continuously is what I keep doing. There was a race in Virginia that I did where it was freezing rain the entire time. Like it started at midnight. It was like 100K. It's like famous for being like really awful like that. And I remember doing that and thinking like, wow, okay, that was actually worse. But I don't think so. I think like part of it is like you're so sleep deprived during the training that like you just can't even you can't even recall to some degree how awful it was because you can't even remember it. But I remember very many times being in that training and thinking like I mean just being amazed that anybody got through it. And you just kind of, I don't know. It's just the only thing that training teaches you is you can just like do more than you're capable of. You think you're capable of. And if you just, don't worry and you just like let it happen, then it's like, wow, okay, all of a sudden it's over. And that's what a lot of it is like. So
I'm interested in when, like, because whenever you hear stories like this of someone saying, "Oh, I've done like this training and then I did things and they were hard, and things got progressively hard and stuff like that." When you are going through something hard again, what do you kind of fall back on? Do you fall back on the last thing that you did and said, "I did that," or do you fall back on other instances that are partly relevant to it? Like, what is your kind of your framing point for like from a mindset perspective or kind of a grit perspective?
yeah, I think that probably happens. I mean, I remember one of the worst things I've done was I did this 100-mile thing on the Appalachian Trail in New Hampshire in June. So that was what I did right before the Tranter. And I remember that was like the first time doing that I was like very specifically recalling like in what I was, going through the basic training. Was like I was very specifically thinking about that the entire time. But I mean, there were moments of the Bob that were truly horrendous. I mean, I think the Bob from probably a purely physical perspective was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But mentally, it's like not terribly long, and you had tons of pacers the entire time. There's tons of interaction. There's tons of like very positive energy. Mentally, it wasn't. I think mentally there were other things that I've done that are probably worse. But from a physical perspective, the Bob was probably the worst.
And is that because
So
you're pushing your body so hard, or because of the impact of the elevation?
pushing the body, yeah, and I think part of that is because I was racing Kilian's time. I was racing Kilian's time, so I had to like obviously go fast to race his time, and then on top of that, there was a lot of that was the most media attention I'd ever had on something. All the pacers had like taken time off of work and everything else to come out, so there was the pressure from that, and then on top of that, like all the pacers were giving me like food and water the entire time, and I was like just drinking. I remember I just drank so much water And I mean, I wasn't like hyponatremic or something. I was like sweating it out. And I think it just enabled me to do so much more work. Like in the future, based on that, I'll like carry more water and drink more water during my stuff, even if it's unsupported.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, I think it did make a big difference. It's just annoying to carry the water though. So, yeah.
And because my experience of SEALs I've met is they're all really big guys. Like it seems as if they put on a huge amount of muscle, which is counter to being a fast runner. So have you had to just transition your body away from that, or were you
Well,
never quite?
I think there's three things kind of going on. I think the first thing is like there is a huge, or I don't even know how many things I have in my head, but like there is a huge, the way that many SEALs that are highlighted by the media and they're like well known. I mean, do tend to be like, bigger guys. It is like it was very, I think like that's like very like mid 2000s, like Iraq. Like I think of that, like guys were like super big, in like Iraq, it was like my impression, it was like a lot of like raids and stuff like that. You're riding in helicopters, you're riding in vehicles, you're getting out, you're kicking in the door, you're like tossing people around. Like it kind of like prioritized guys being bigger. But like when you have mission sets, there are other mission sets that the SEALs engage in that it's more valuable to be smaller and to be thinner and to be a better runner. And so I think that's the way things are kind of going. And when I was in, like you could see people increasingly kind of like prioritizing running. And then the other, I guess the last thing is there are some guys that are very small. There are guys that are like incredibly good runners that are around. So I mean that's like a total thing. I mean you have like every single body type you could imagine.
So that would that be part of the training then, to actually get used to endurance running in full kit?
Oh yeah. And that's all, buds, the basic training it's literally just running and cold water exposure. It's like the two things it really is. There are other things that happen, but like when you boil it down, like it's basically just running and cold water exposure.
Pay a lot of
So
money
I
now
mean,
to go
I
on.
think the training.
I say you pay a lot of money now to go on a retreat to do that, wouldn't you? To do a running and cold water exposure. It's like it's like a perfect example of the benefits.
Yeah. No. It is kind of funny. Yeah, people pay for that sort of thing. But the taxpayer paid my trip, but I wouldn't have done that voluntarily.
And was it obvious at that stage that you were, incredibly gifted? Like, had you been a runner prior to that, or did it?
I had what I learned was going through the training was like not that I was like a good runner. I just like remember during Hell Week that like my body like towards the end of it just like relative to my peers just like wasn't as degraded. And that was, honestly, I don't think that really came down to like any training or anything I had, I think, or, background I had. I think that was probably just, genetic. Um, and, and I think it was probably genetic from I didn't degrade as much. And then like, I didn't enjoy that, but I think I enjoyed it more than other people, there were other parts of the training like the underwater stuff that I was horrible with. I couldn't, I really, really didn't like it. And other guys didn't have as much of a problem with it. So it wasn't like I was some like superhero. It was just like, the Hell Week stuff. I just noticed that I was just a little bit better suited for that. Yeah. So that was,
oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say that got me thinking about, I always had an interest in doing ultras and I was like, oh, well, maybe if I was good here, then I'd be good there. So.
And so what was your first race that you actually took on then to test yourself?
I did I mean, I had run some cross country and track in high school and I did a marathon in college and stuff, but I mean, I didn't really train for it all that much. And then I did right after I finished like the basic training, I did a 50-mile ultra in California and it was okay. And then, yeah, I mean, it was all right. I mean, it wasn't for more than another year that I did another ultra after that one. So,
and was this while you were still in the force, or had you?
Oh yeah. This was right after I finished like the very famous, like right after I finished Buds. Yeah.
And because I'm trying to kind of make the timeline of where, because it seems like from the UK as if you almost just emerged as this finished, polished stone that.
Well, I mean,
Just smashing
I think
FKTs,
what you don't see is like probably 1,000 hours of training at least per year since like 2015 or so, you know, or maybe even earlier than that, 2014 maybe. And it's like at the beginning, that was like a lot of weightlifting went into that, and a lot of like kind of some CrossFit style work. And then, ever since the beginning of 2019, it's been very, very little lifting. It's been, primarily all running and skiing. But I mean, yeah, it's just like a huge training load. Yeah.
And do you think that, because if you look at people like Kilian, if you look at the typical runners who do these long FKTs, there'll be runners who might do weights. Kilian will do schemo and the likes, but it's quite rare to get someone actually coming into it who's got a weights background. Do you think that's made quite a difference to you?
I think that's a huge advantage. And there's another, I know, like there's like a pretty good like FKT like racing scene like on the steep mountainous trails in the Northeast United States. And if you look at like what I think are probably the three fastest guys on that, probably like Jordan Fields, Ryan Atkins, and then myself. Like Jordan has like a Nordic skiing background. We have like a very similar build. He did like a lot of weightlifting and Nordic skiing. And then Ryan Atkins is like one of the best, is probably the best obstacle course racer in the world, and he lifts weights a lot. So I think the strength definitely helps on like the steeper, more mountainous stuff. I mean, I think Tom Evans has a fair, weightlifting background too, in the British military. So yeah, I think it does confer some advantages. Yeah.
And
sure.
did you learn how to run trail as part of the kind of the army, the Navy, the SEALs,
No.
or is that and so how much of an obstacle was that to you then becoming fast on like longer runs?
It was fine because I think I grew up and I just like hiked a lot, and I just like ran in the woods. I mean, my friend and I used to just do it all the time. We would just hike and just run off trail, just like, for like, I don't even know how many hours per week, probably not very many, but like enough where I always had like I don't know what, like the proprioception or the balance or like the skills just to like run off trail just always came kind of natural to me. And I think some of it is also a mindset. It's like any other kind of like adrenaline sport, like running downhill quickly kind of is on technical terrain,
So what was
what
was the big kind of FKT / race that you went for that you thought, actually, this is quite a big deal if I managed to?
Well, I think every single thing, almost pretty much everything was like a stair step, up. Like I had those ultras I did in 2019, which are all of those I did like 5, they're all basically, kind of the same. And I had some confidence coming out of that. And then the first one I did, there was a record on a trail in Virginia. It's like between two wilderness areas. It's like the Priest and Three Ridges is the name of the FKT. It's like 21 miles and like 8,000
Priest and Three
climbing.
Ridges. Is the Priest the name of a mountain or a name of?
Yeah. So
okay.
There's a mountain, that's called the Priest, and there's like 3 mountains across the street. And so you just like run and just like tag all of them basically. It's a great route. I trained so much on that when I was in Virginia in the Navy. But I did that, and I remember when I first looked at that time, when I first got to Virginia, and I was like, wow, that's like really fast. And then like I got the record and I was like, wow, okay, like that's pretty cool. And then I went up and I did, my goal was to like set the fastest time on like what I felt were like the 5 most competitive like day FKTs in the Northeast. And one of them I like tried to on site, and it was like ridiculous. Like I'd never run the Northeast before, and I didn't get it. But after the Priest and Three Ridges, like the first one I tried was like probably the most low hanging of the 5. And then I went to like,
and what are they all called? Do they all have wonderful names?
The first
as well?
one, yeah. So I tried the first one I tried was the Pemigewasset Loop, and that was like in October of 2020, and that was like a total like fail, like whatever, like it didn't even, wasn't even that great. And then
And what was the reason behind the failure? Was that did you get lost? Was it just not knowing the
no,
terrain and having the right trainers, or?
so what happened was I had never run in the Northeast, so I didn't really know how rocky it was. And like I was able to get good training in Virginia. Like I had physiologically, I was like pretty decent. I just like didn't really mentally, I didn't really know what I was getting into. Um, and then the other, so I was doing a little bit of navigating on the fly, but I don't think that slowed me down too much. The big problem was the guy who was kind of like the reigning champion of the FKTs up there, Jordan Fields, the guy with the Nordic skiing background. He had set that record as like as part of a training run. Like he had gone out and he was going to do like a faster run of the course just to get a feel for the time. And he was feeling so good that he just went and he just did the record. And so I was like, okay, like this guy, it was a super hot day. He like didn't focus very much. He didn't taper. Like I was like, okay, this is going to be a joke. This will be easy. And I mean, obviously, Jordan's just very, very fast. And so that didn't work. And then in the end, like I had my hands full with like the other four the following summer. And I mean, I've always thought about going back and like, it's called the Pemi loop is what people refer to it as. I've always thought about doing it again, but I don't know. It's like my least favorite of the ones. It's like the most, it's like 50K and like 10,000 feet climbing. It's like kind of the flattest of all of them.
Yeah.
So I mean, the other ones I just like the other ones more. So, but
and I
yeah,
know that
yeah.
the trail running community can be quite protective of
Mm.
its FKTs and skeptical to runners coming along who haven't necessarily almost earned their prizes. Like, did you face any of that skepticism in I Run Far or any of the blogs or things? Or
No, I've never dealt with that. I've never had any issues, and I don't necessarily know why that is. I mean, um, I think you guys have more of a history of people cheating, perhaps, because you
just
guys
us two. You've heard about us.
Yeah,
just you two,
I
just you
didn't think
two.
anyone was watching.
Damn it! At last,
I
someone's
think just
called
like
us out.
I think because the UK has like a much longer history of like racing these records for time. In the US, it's like pretty new. So we just like haven't had time for someone to start cheating yet. So like
Oh
everyone
no, we're
kind of
good at
just like
cheating.
trusts each other.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess
No,
there's always a
there's a
record you can
big
go and
opportunity.
you can go and set a record somewhere without cheating. So why would you go and?
We're hoping to bring cheating to the US. You're going to suddenly see a lot of FKTs collapse
all in one day.
Yeah, exactly. From people who don't look like they could
Simultaneously.
collapse them.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a huge opportunity for it. The market is right. Yeah, yeah.
And when you were looking at the FKTs, how were you assessing like how approachable they were? Would you get a sense of
Yeah.
whether you could get them in advance or not?
Yeah, it's really, really hard. Like I've gotten to the point where I think especially after the Bob, I think well, kind of after the Tranter to a degree, like the Tranter, I had Finley splits and I was like running some of Finley splits and I was like practicing off of Finley splits a little bit, but like it never felt sustainable. Like it never felt good. And like this is something Finley and I talked about is like on race day, like we both feel for like ourselves, like we unlock like another gear on like the pressure of race day. Like, like the effort just feels different on race day. So all that is to say, like, it's really hard for me to guess like, oh, am I going to get this or not?
Yeah.
And I've just gotten to the point where I think now, like, I'm just not going to worry about it anymore. And I'm just going to go and I'm just going to give it my 100%. And, there's nothing really I can do about it. I got to give it a shot. There's only so many routes that I'm interested in. I gotta try them. And like the Bob, like the only reason I like felt okay on the Bob was because I'd like beaten Finley on the Tranter and like he had come close to Kilian's time. So that was it. If I didn't have that, then like if the record had been 12:30 or something, like I would have been like, oh, no way I could break that. But I'd still have to go and I'd have to go and try. So, and I still obviously I would have gotten it. So it's like, yeah.
Because I don't think we've actually discussed the Tranter before. Strangely, on the pod.
Yeah.
So is Tranter is that one Scotland as well? As the
So it's the original basis of the Ramsey round. if you know
Okay.
the Ramsey.
Yeah.
So the Ramsey is like a 5-peak extension to the Tranter.
And so was the Tranter
Yeah.
there, and then they tried to almost convert it into a Bob Graham equivalent to make it the Ramsey. Is
Yeah.
that how the progression was?
Well, I don't think it was a Bob Graham. It was just like, Philip Tranter, I think was like in 1964. He did the Tranter round, and like
Yeah.
the peaks up there. I don't even know what that would. I can't even remember like the name of that valley. I guess it's like the peaks there with the bend and everything else are kind of like in a J. The best peaks are kind of in a J, where you have like the Memors or like the small side of the J, and then the big side of the J is like Ben Nevis through like Stope Corey Eason or whatever it is. And then there's like in the upper right, there's like 3 like not very aesthetic peaks. And so the Tranter just like does the bottom of the J and then cuts across and then does the other side of the J, the Ben Nevis side, and it leaves off the Easons up top, because to add them in, you'd have to do those peaks in the upper right, which I can't even remember, but like there's like no trod. It's just like, really soft heather. So, and you have to access them with like this trail that's like kind of boggy, and you run on the road. I mean, it's just like, the Ramsey's a better 24-hour challenge, because I think it's like in comparable difficulty probably to the Bob or the Paddy Buckley, but like the Tranter is just like a way better running route, way better racing route. So,
and was that the first time you'd properly run on kind of European, well, British trail?
Yeah.
And how did like how much of a difference did you find it?
It's so I was coming from the Northeast, and the Northeast, the trails are steep, but they aren't quite as steep as in the UK, but they're extremely rocky and extremely technical, like big, like, I mean, basically like big mountain talus that's just in the forest. So you're going up and over rocks and boulders and slabs, and some areas are extremely steep that you're going up and down, but typically the routes just will go straight up fall line or go up like a stream bed or something. So I felt like running in the UK was a little bit different because it was a little bit more sustained, because typically it's like a grassy, hill, and it just points straight up and it's consistent grade the whole way. Whereas like in the US, like you're going up like a stream bed for a bit, and then you're like crossing over and it's a little bit flat, and then you're going up another really steep pitch, and you have like tons of rocks and boulders you're climbing up in between. So it's just like a little bit of a different stimulus, but yeah, the carryover was pretty good. I mean, it's like the best place to prepare for running in the UK is running in the Northeast, I think.
Which is almost weird, because if you look at the trail races, it sounds as if the UK FKTs are far more runnable than the American FKTs, but actually the trail races in Europe, for example, are far more technical than the trail races in the States. Which seemed bizarre, that they've almost the disconnect between the natural trail and the trail in the races they choose to put on is so great.
Yeah, I think there's two reasons for that. Number one, it's because the US scene is primarily focused out west, and out west, for whatever reason, they graded the trails for pack animals, and so they're very, very runnable and relatively flat. And then I think the second thing is, and this is just my conjecture, is like the European trail racing scene, you see like a lot of like mountaineers and skiers that are like going faster, and they're doing less technical projects. They're more technical than the US, but they're more typical than these people's typical project. I think it's just like the way it started. Like, folks like Kilian, coming together to race on something that's less technical. Whereas in the US, like you have a bunch of like flat marathoners that are like, oh, let's run farther, and so I think that's why, and also like that would also explain why like the US scene is like super ultra focused. It's like very like 100-mile, 50-mile focused, whereas like the Euro scene is like much, shorter race, Sierra Zinal, Zagama, races that are marathon or shorter in length. So, yeah.
And so coming into something like Bob Graham, because we've discussed at length before Kilian broke the record, and even after, about how it almost felt as if you needed to understand the Lake District to be able to attempt those records. And even back then, no one could beat Billy Bladder's record, even with knowledge. And like, how did you come in and form a team? And how did you negotiate that with, I guess, with the credibility you'd need to get a good enough team to actually attempt the record you'd gone for?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it was before I had to get a team together, I had to like learn it myself. And like, I mean, there were parts of that, I became pretty good at navigating the bob. Like I'm not the best. There are certainly like Matt Atkinson is like better than me at navigating the bob, but as far as like knowing all the bob lines, I'm probably like getting close. Like I wasn't like super reliant on my pacers. Like I could have like done,
So how, I mean,
90% a good
how long did
job.
that take to like? How long before did you come
Yeah.
over and?
So I mean, to some degree, the Tranter really helped because like the Tranter got my mind kind of like in the zone of like, okay, I gotta like pick fast lines. Okay, like Finley, honestly, it was like what I did was I took all of Finley's lines. So I went back in Finley's Strava and I went like all like the FKTs he'd done and like all the speed efforts he'd done. And I loaded them all into like Gaia, like a mapping application where I
Did
could
he know
overlay
you were
them.
doing this at the time, or?
I don't think so, no. And so, but what I could see
You
was
should
what's
have
interesting was
closed
like,
his profile.
yeah. I could see like over time how he changed his rationale. So like when I first approached the Tranter, I would do like the lines that he did like for his 2016 Tranter FKT. Like I would look at the
Yeah.
terrain and go, okay, this makes the most sense. And then it took me a long time to like come around to his 2020 lines. Cause like when I would first look at the terrain, his like 2020 lines like wouldn't be terribly intuitive. His 2020 lines, I did not find them intuitive. Like when I first showed up and I tried to do his 2020 lines, I'm like, there's no way this is faster. Like a lot of times what I found he would do is like his 2020 lines were just much more direct. So they were a lot of times over like much more steep, they were over steeper terrain, they were rockier terrain, they were more technical terrain, but or he would do like ridiculous shit. Like he would side hill. Like there would be like a, maybe a 50-foot rise on runnable trail, and he would side hill like on rocks and talus to avoid going up 50 feet. And I was like, there's no way this is faster. And then, in the end, I just kind of like committed. I was just like, okay, I just got to trust Finley and that he knows these. And I'm just going to, adopt his mindset and just like do all the lines that he does. There was one place where I did do a different line than him, but
And do you think it is always, if a normal runner were to go and do those lines, do you think it would be faster for them? Or do you think you almost need to have adapted as a runner to ensure that your tendons can get used to running and like edging, and you need to have a certain strength to be able to pull it off?
yeah, it could go either way because like other parts of it were like, kind of the lines he picked. There were some places that were like steep and exposed. And if you weren't comfortable running on more steep and exposed terrain, then it wouldn't be pleasant to kind of go those ways.
So I mean,
So
but to
yeah.
learn a 13 hours of running route is almost like learning the lines to like 8 films back to back. Like how long did it
No,
take?
no, it's not that bad because like so I ran the whole of the Bob. I tried to run the whole thing 3 times before I did it, and I ended up racing the Bob a little bit sooner than I wanted to. So there was 1 or 2 lines that I only ran once, like the descent from Robinson. I only ran the line that I ended up taking. Well, there was actually a line that Matt Atkinson took me on. I'd never been on before. But some of those lines in there, like that I had planned on taking, like I only ran one time, in training because I just ran out of time. But um generally a lot of the lines, like what I did was I just like overlaid like George Foster's, Finley's, Kilian's, and Beth's GPX files, and I just looked at all the places they differed. And there were some places where like everybody would kind of have a consensus and like one person would deviate. And there were other places where like everybody took a different line, like up Kirkfell, like everybody had like a different way up Kirkfell. Like Beth and George took like the parachute line off of Blencathra, and Killian and Finley took like Hall's Fell. So there were like a couple different, weirdness that kind of happened. And I just had to go out and kind of try all of them. And I
And
think in many places it really didn't matter all that much which line you kind of took. But there were some bad lines that Finley took, and there were some bad lines that Kilian was on. Just like objectively not the best. There were bad lines I think there were bad lines that George Foster took.
and, and
The only line that I fucked up was off of a Hall's Fell, which pissed me off. It was like my slowest time ever going down a Hall's Fell was like during my Bob. But
and do you get a sense that those lines actually change based on the weather, the time of year, and the year? So that actually one year could be great, but then another year Heather's grown in a different way, or the
Well,
rains had more of an impact? Or
I think everybody kind of race it. Everybody has raced the Bob in generally similar conditions. I think obviously, yes, Kilian had very dry conditions. Beth had a little bit wetter conditions, I think, but I don't think it would have significantly. The only place I think it would have significantly changed the line is from Steel Fell to like trying to even remember the name, like Sergeant Man, somewhere like in there on leg 3. Like if it is drier, like you can take much better lines. And it was kind of wet for me, but like Matt Atkinson, just like we were just taking all of like the most direct lines, and we were just like running through the, kind of the wet. So I mean, it ended up being okay. But I think if, yeah, hypothetically, like you could we could have, if it had been drier, we could have taken slightly better lines. And some of Kilian's lines, like I went and ran them in training, I remember, and I don't know how close they were to what I ended up doing, but I remember they were just like, when I ran them in training, it was like 6 inches of standing water I was running through. And like, I'm sure when he did it, it was dry.
And so when you kind of look at, because on paper, I'd assume that Kilian's a better technical runner than you are. So when
I actually don't think so. I think it depends. I think if it was fifth class, if it was descending like very fifth class or fourth class, I think he'd probably be better than me. But I honestly think like going fast downhill, third class or easier. I don't know if I'm not certain about this, but it just goes back to like the weightlifting background. I think like I am able possibly to run faster downhill technical running than he is, but I think uphill, he's probably faster. And that was like from what I was seeing, like the segments I looked at for the Bob, it looked like I was faster on the downhill segments and he was faster on the uphill ones. And then also, like, I just heard anecdotally about like UTMB, like the guy who came in second at UTMB was talking about how like every uphill, like Kilian would build a lead on him and then he would like reel him in on every downhill. And that was kind of the way I felt like my Bob went also. So, Kilian is a smaller guy. He is much lighter. He's a little more slim than me. And I think that helps him on the uphill. And I think that may be to his detriment on the downhill a little bit.
And
Sure.
did you have a sense that you could beat the record by as much as you had? Like, were you coming in attacking with that aggression?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if I think I would have bet hypothetically, like if I could have taken all the emotion out of it and everything and like looked at it very clinically, I think 12:30, I think was a reasonable guess just based off of what I beat Finley by on the Tranter. And because he had 4 times to refine his Tranter time. So his Tranter time was a much better reflection of his best effort than his one-off attempt at the Bob. If he had attempted the Bob 5 times. So I felt like his Bob time, I felt like was slower than his Tranter time, than his Tranter record, relatively. And I also felt like the longer, because Finley does less volume than me, I felt like the longer that a race would go, the more of a advantage I would build up on him. So I think, so 8.5 hours, 14 minutes, just, if you were to go 50% longer, you could assume it would be 21 minutes. And then I ended up going 35 minutes faster than Finley. Is that right? 12:57, or no, he was 12:59, maybe 37 minutes faster than him. So I think 30 minutes kind of makes sense. 30, 40 minutes, I think kind of makes sense. So, I mean, but that wasn't, I wasn't confident in that logic going into it. It wasn't like, I was like, oh yeah, no, this should be statistically, this seems fine. And I also knew like that was betting on me, like going absolutely to the well and like destroying myself like I did on the Tranter. So.
And you mentioned you do a lot more mileage. Like what type of mileage are you running then typically in a training block?
My mileage doesn't really change. My time training doesn't really change too much throughout the year. I keep it fairly even-ish. I mean, maybe it goes maybe a little bit longer. Maybe I'll do some like peak weeks, like right before a big race or something. But generally across the year, like it's 20 to 24 hours of running per week. Generally, 24 hours is what I try to hit every week. And so, around here it's slower. So around here I'm doing 24 hours a week, and I'm hitting like, I think last week was 70 miles and 40,000 feet of climbing. And then I do also a workout of Stairmaster.
So you're doing
I do a Stairmaster workout. That's not include that.
It's an immense amount of climbing, really.
Yeah. I mean, typically 35 on feet, like 35 to 45 plus a workout on the Stairmaster. I would say it's very typical. Yeah. 1,000 feet of climbing. Yeah. Per week.
And a couple of gym sessions or?
No lifting. I don't lift weights at all. I just only lift weights if I get injured. And I feel like I need to address some strength and balance. But yeah.
Now I've messaged Kilian to find out if he's got any questions for you, because I was just chatting about something else. So he said, first he said he was following you this summer, super impressed, and he's loving what you're doing. Very nice guy. He was interested to know what's your view? How do you see sport competition versus FKTs? Because you've clearly lent more into FKTs to date.
I really like attempting to like master a discipline and like a route. And when you're racing, you're just trying to be best. Racing just incentivizes you to be the best on that day against the people who show up that day. And obviously like there's course records and stuff, but like to get a course record, most of the time you need perfect conditions. So I like FKTs because it just like, I mean, amongst many reasons, but I think the main primary reason is it just like encourages you to like maximize your effort and like maximize conditions and your prep and everything else to like produce like this one perfect effort. And then if you get it right, you never have to go back and like and do that again. And like, I mean, I think that's kind of a cool way to do it, where it's just like, you go like you do 100% on something, and then that's it. Like you have your time and that's it. So like I think shooting for that perfection is cool, and that's kind of like the aim in FKTs. It's like to get the most kind of out of yourself, and like to produce like one perfect effort, and to scout the route and recce the route and like get everything completely dialed. Whereas racing, it's like, okay, you just want to be the best on that day. Like everybody's racing with compromised conditions. Like everybody's racing with the compromise that comes from like having a race date placed in their calendar where they may not be completely ready. Their training may not be optimized. They may be a little bit sick. And so I just like eliminating those variables. Yeah.
So if you're coming up to say a Bob or a Tranter or a big FKT, at what point are you starting to assess if it's a goer? How do you decide, and at what point do you commit to it? And at what point do you then start changing your training to actually ramp down a bit, change your nutrition, and know that you're definitely going to attempt it rather than just change from training in a maybe?
Yeah, I think that is tricky. And I think that was something both with the Tranter and the Bob that was like kind of funny, is like I was going over there and like training on the Tranter, and then I went and I ran with Finley and like him and like Tom. I was running with him and like Tom Owens, and they were like, when are you going to do the Tranter? And I hadn't even really thought about it all that much. Like I thought about it like, oh, end of July some point. And like the end of July was coming up, and I was like, oh, well, I mean, I haven't really thought about it. Like, I mean, and I was like, I don't know, next Thursday. Like I had done like a mega taper, like a 1 month taper for my 100-mile thing on the Appalachian Trail, and I don't think that worked for me. And
just too long,
hearing too long, and I think hearing what Kilian's kind of been saying, like he doesn't think that taper is best either for him or maybe even in general. So for the Bob, I wanted to taper longer, but I had like a really good weather window come up, and so I was like forced to do it a little bit sooner than I wanted to, and I ended up having like a 6-day taper. Which I think like if I could have chose a taper, I think I would have picked like 10 days.
What do you make of, because for someone like Jim's come over to France to almost try and set FKT but doing it on the day of UTMB, and really almost taking what you've described as your approach to FKTs, he's now bringing to just committing to that one route and getting to know the trail back to front too. Does that appeal to you? And do you?
I mean,
go ahead.
I think that just so what I mentioned was only a small part of like why I like FKTs. I think it's the biggest single part, but I think it's a small fraction of the whole. I do like having a more kind of like, picking a route because it's aesthetic, and like not because like it's where they're able to get like permits, or in the US like permitting is very complicated, and so like races are often forced off of the best terrain, and so I do like going out and racing the best terrain. Like the Bob is kind of an example of something that was like much more race-esque, but like a lot of the routes I do, like I'll go out and it'll just be me. Like there won't be anybody else out there. And so it'll just be like me and like, the mountain or whatever. And that's it. And that's what I really, really like. And so that's a big part of it. I mean, I'm also like I think like the Navy, I think scarred me a little bit where I'm kind of like a little bit anti, authoritarian now. And I don't I have some problems with that. And the whole idea of going to a race and just like being some like damn
is this how
being
you
some
left
like
the
fucking
Navy? Were you
yes.
dishonorably discharged or?
No, not quite. But it's like, part of
Are
me
we
just
are
like
we allowed to
resents.
go into that? Just because
Oh yeah.
we hate
Yeah, yeah.
authority as well. That's why we're bad boys at heart. So
No, I mean, like, a part of me resents the idea of going to UTMB and like being some fucking dancing monkey for the UTMB organization. Like, I don't have fucking sponsors for that reason. Like, I don't want anybody to be fucking profiting off of me. I mean, like, I coach for a company and I love the guys that I coach for, and I'm happy, like, the small degree, like, they're able to like, make some money off my coaching, and it's a symbiotic relationship. But like, I don't have sponsors. I don't do races, and part of that is because like I don't want anybody like making money off of me. I don't like that shit. So
but if do you I completely understand that, but I guess that is only a negative if you don't feel you're getting as much out of a relationship as they're getting from you. Do you think you could find an understanding with a brand or with a race
yeah,
where actually you're
100%.
getting your piece of the pie as well?
Yeah, 100%. And I think like, like races that are more low key, like Hard Rock here in the US, like do appeal to me. And I would like to I think Hard Rock is a great race. Obviously Kilian loves Hard Rock. I mean, and just to say something else, because I don't know. I mean, like Kilian, I mean, I think these, in addition to like my pacing team and everybody else, like and like, the people who supported me, outside of pacing. Kilian, I think Finley had like obviously a huge role in my records this summer because he was the one who kind of like, I used cannibalized so much of his
Discovered all the
enthusiasm on the
routes.
tranter. Well, he like I just used his so much of his like logic and everything on the tranter and his route finding, and that was enormously helpful. And then I mean Kilian, like my whole like years ago, like Kilian's whole thing is like training has to be like a lifestyle. Like Kilian doesn't like train for races. He just like trains as a lifestyle. And like that has been like one of the most influential things upon me. And I mean, I think in some ways it's good because it's just cool to see like different people like reflect the same ideas, but like you see like a lot of like very successful people in like business talk about how like you have to get like you have to get some sort of utility, some sort of satisfaction from just like the process. And like that's like exactly what like Kilian's whole like, his whole thing is, I think like independently, kind of like reaching the same conclusion. Uh, and so yeah, I mean like Kilian's like entire like training methodology and everything, like I just basically just like, ripped it basically. So I mean Kilian, like I owe him so much.
So
So yeah.
I'm going to put a idea into your head. So if you're not that into the UTMB machine, how about you go out, you run an FKT on a UTMB course, but you time it to beat the record. You need to be crossing the finish line 3 minutes before the start of UTMB.
Well, I think I actually have thought about doing something kind of like that. I think the express problem with doing exactly that is there'd be too many fucking people all over the course, and it would be like
yeah.
really, it would be really tricky. But I have thought about going and doing like an FKT of the UTMB course with like UTMB rules, but like
because Pau Capet went for sub 20 originally in lockdown, exactly the same concept.
Yeah. No, I have thought about doing that, but I think it's a little bit unfair to, Kilian or whoever has the record at the time. And then I think like the whole thing with UTMB is like it's like not meant to be done like that. It's like my kind of opinion. It's like meant to be done in a race. It is a race, and it's like it's not a great comparison. I mean, I think it does make sense, and I'm not a huge fan of the UTMB organization, so I wouldn't really mind. But if they were annoyed or something by it. But like at the same time, I don't think that's the way it's supposed to be done. And I think like it is actually a race. And I think it would be, the final thing is like, the biggest thing is, it would be unfair to like, Kilian, who had just come off of COVID and he had to go and race it.
Yeah,
Like that was the
yeah.
day he did not. He had good conditions, but he just like had COVID and he had to like, so no, I don't know. Maybe I would consider it, but I think I would just, my other problem with UTMB is it would basically be my entire season if I did UTMB. Like I would, because I would have to do a qualifying race. And like, I mean, it was kind of silly for me to like racing is like, mountain sports are kind of like my whole life right now. And to go and just like, to do a build up and to go and do a race with the express purpose of just getting into another race. I mean, it just seems like a waste of time to me. And I would do one of those qualifying races. I would do them in like June or something. And so then I would have to stop my ski season. I have to switch to running probably in April. And
Yeah,
so I would
yeah.
like a lot of my ski season, I would lose pretty much all of my ski objectives I have this year are going to happen in like April, May, June. So I'd lose all of those. So my whole season, my whole year would basically just come down to like
Yeah.
UTMB. It would come down to one day, and it would come down to a race where I've seen like the race footage of UTMB. There's like 15 fucking billion people out there. There's like, the organization is so over the top. Like, I mean, it's just like doesn't really appeal to me. I would love to like race Kilian and stuff but and all the other fast people that show up at that race. But
So
I don't
basically,
know.
you're
That would be like
saying
the only
you
reason.
want to take on Kilian a UTMB course, but a different time.
Uh, I don't know. Like
I'm trying to fish you into
Kilian
it,
has a
trying to
lot
track
to
you into this.
Kilian has a lot of FKTs. I could go try another one of those, but
Well, I used to be teammates with John Alban, and when he left
okay, yeah.
London, we all came up with a plan that as soon as he left, we'd all take down all of his Strava segments across London when he was no longer able to
Defend him.
compete. But sadly, we weren't
Yeah,
quick
yeah.
enough. We couldn't do it. So.
Oh, really? Oh, damn. That's unfortunate. Yeah.
So then in terms of, because you mentioned the ski season, like does that, do the opportunities for you in skiing, are they similar? Are there big FKTs out there that you go for? Are there kind of cross country trails that are known, or is it more you just love skiing?
It's 50-50. It's one of those things where with FKTs, a big thing is like, the competition like never ends. So even if a route doesn't already have a record, it really doesn't matter all that much, because if it is a good course and you do set a good time, then somebody else will come eventually and challenge it, and also like if people who know can like look at the mountain and like look at the vertical feet and look at the terrain and the conditions and everything else, and people can assess, like, you can objectively assess like, okay, I had a good day, that's a fast time, so there's competition beyond what's already been raced. And then another part of it is just like kind of building the competition, for the next generation, because I do think the FKTs will be big. And I think more people will I've always thought more people will race primarily FKTs, like I kind of have been in the future. No, but in the US, there are fast ski records that do exist. Mount Washington in New Hampshire has a fast record. Mount Rainier has a fast record. Denali has a fast record. Amongst, Mount Hood, I raced, has a fast record. Mount Talak, I set a record on it as fast. So, I mean, there are existing ones. There's some like mountains in the Salt Lake City area that have records. So,
And I've seen on, particularly on Golden Child, that a lot of athletes like Remy or Sophia Lokely, it's very hard to transition from snow skiing straight into trail running and be able to actually to last the distance, because your legs aren't used to that pounding. Like, do you find that, given that you are going from skimo to some massive distances, like have you found a way to actually prepare your legs, or do you also struggle to transition?
I think it is. I haven't struggled because I've just been very conservative. The only year that I've done it is just this last year, and I was quite conservative. Like in March, I started running. In April, it was probably like 50-50 running, skiing. And then May, it was like 10% skiing. And then in June, all running. I mean, but then I raced June 15th, I raced that 100-mile thing. this year I'll probably run 1 day a week all ski season at least. And I'll like, the thing is though, like I've intentionally focused because my ski season is going to be so long this year. Um, because I'm just like racing some projects that go better in the spring. I was thinking about doing a more runnable, one year I want to do a more runnable kind of like FKT, kind of like tour. So like
Mm.
Grand Canyon, rim to rim to rim is quite runnable. The Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier is quite runnable. But like this year, my ski season is going to go so long. I know I need to focus on less runnable projects. They're basically like a skimo project, but instead of skiing down, you're just going to run down super steep rock, which
Yeah.
is like, and it'll be short. So like, it'll be very easy to come out of ski season and do that type of thing. Um,
And what is the like? Do
yeah.
you struggle with motivation? Because for a lot of people, competition is the biggest motivation, and it's very easy to get motivated when there's a specific person or you can visualize that finish. But when you're just running by yourself, like it's a lot harder to visualize the
Oh,
joy of like just finishing at a certain time.
no, I don't think so. Yeah, you're trying to break the record. But I mean, it really doesn't matter to me because like if I'm by myself or with other people, like I'm not gauging my effort off of like often what other people are doing. Like it really doesn't matter. Like, I mean, there's really like during the Bob, like I didn't really ever really look at my watch during the transfer. I looked at my watch some, but I mean, I got to the point where I just stopped looking at it. There was like no purpose. For me, there's like no purpose in looking at my watch because like I'm either going to look at it and see him ahead and I'm not going to fucking slow down, or I'm going to see him behind and I'm like not going to speed up. So it really doesn't really make a difference what the watch is saying or what other people are doing. Um,
What is the drive
yeah.
then? Would you say is it just the challenge then?
No, no, no. All that is to say, like, I do want to win, but it's just like I wouldn't be able to go any faster than I'm
Mm.
going. And I'm trying to get the best time that I can possibly get. So I'm not gonna slow down. Um, the only time where like the watch is like helpful is obviously if you're doing a really long effort and you're trying to pace yourself at the beginning of it.
Mm.
Uh, but I mean,
But
beyond
I mean, the
that, I mean,
motivation in general for going for FKTs, because a lot of people, the challenge
yeah.
actually is the motivation to do that extra long run when it's wet and cold, and
Yeah.
you can't taste the finish line.
No, I mean, I train just as hard because like I'm trying to set the time and I'm trying to set the record. And like, I also have in my mind, like, even if the record is easy, I'm
Mm.
racing because I know, like on the Bob, like I was ahead of Kilian, but I know Tom Evans is going to do it eventually. And I know John Alvin might do it. And I know Finley's going to do it probably again. So I'm just pretending like those people are,
Mm.
I'm not like imagining they're behind me or something, but I like know they're gonna come. So I know I've got to like run as fast as I can because I know there's gonna become a day where I'm gonna be dot watching and one of these motherfuckers is gonna be doing it. So
And do you
You've
think
deleted all your Strava if that's the thing to make sure that they're not following your
yeah,
lines.
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
and
yeah,
and do you
yeah.
think that your legacy will be seen as significantly or last as long as someone who's got titles?
I mean, potentially, I think it lasts longer because, like, I mean, who like race courses change, you
Mm.
know? And to me, it's like course records are like where it's really at, and like, if the course changes, then the course record kind of goes out the window. So it really doesn't make sense. But like the Bob will never change. Like
Mm.
Mount Hood, like the bottom where the bottom of Mount Hood is will never change unless the mountain erupts or something. Um, and so it's like I think it's longer.
Mm.
Personally, like who cares like who you're competing with? Like the fact that somebody wins UTMB or something is just as much a reflection of the other people that show up on that day, you know? And it's like in 50 years, who the fuck's gonna care who you beat at UTMB to come in first? It's like, oh, this person won UTMB in 2015 or something, or won UTMB, 50 years ago when the race when it wasn't very competitive, you know? Like if they ran that time today, they get crushed. Um, but it's like I am racing for the future, I'm trying to. So in like 50 years, when someone goes and races Mount Hood, someone's like, oh wow, this time is actually quite stout, even though someone did it 50 years ago. Like if I would just want to break the record, like it would have been easier. Um, but like that's kind of the aim.
And then
Um,
within that, then which FKTs are still out there for you, and how would you rank, do you think, in 20 years' time, 50 years' time, the world will rank the world's FKTs? Which one's going to be the one everyone wants, then second, then third, then fourth?
Well, I think when it comes to like ultra distance trail mountain running, like when it comes to ultra distance mountain running, steep running, I don't think it gets better than the Bob. I think that is kind of the top of the top, which I think is in some ways is a little bit challenging for me because I've got to, I've kind of almost kind of go backwards a tiny bit, depending on your perspective, to kind of do these other projects, because like that is the best, I think. And I mean, it's tough to say. I can tell you that the Bob will probably always be at the top. But there are other records that I'd like to see like higher, like that route I did in New Hampshire on the Appalachian Trail. I'd love to see like that record become very competitive and more people do that, because I think that's a great line.
And do you think it needs do you think it needs a community around an area to, because that's why the Bob pile is so big, is because it's got a whole trail running community based purely on those trails. Do you think that's needed?
I think that's probably needed. Yeah, I think that's probably what it needs. I mean, the Bob the Tranter is like probably the Tranter's a better running line than the Bob. It's like more scenic. I think it's better underfoot. It's like I like the Tranter more in many respects, but it doesn't have the cultural aspect. And I think that cultural aspect is why the Bob is so good. And that's going to be hard doesn't really exist as much in the US. In the US, the scene is very like backpacking focused. It's very like Appalachian Trail, like super long distance focused, camping focused. So it just, the running community just doesn't quite exist to kind of give, but like routes like the Presidential Traverse is like super, that's like a mega classic FKT. It's up there with the Bob as far as being classic, like the Hut Traverse, mega classic, like Grand Canyon, like Wonderland Trail. I mean, and then obviously all the mountains, the one-off mountain records. So like Matterhorn, Mount Blanc, Long's Peak, Grand Teton, Mount Whitney, Denali.
You tempted by Mount Fuji?
I think it'd be cool. Yeah, I've always kind of thought about it. Yeah, I don't really know, like the record culture is like very weird there. I can barely figure out what the FKTs are, but no, I think that'd be a cool one. I don't really know. I think it'd be great.
So we've got another question from Kilian. It's how would you compare the UK culture of fell running versus the US culture?
I really liked how low key a lot of the stuff was in the UK. It's like in the US, like everyone's all about like bigger, like more consumerism, like more over the top, more live tracking, more bullshit. And so
fell running is like you don't even know a fell race is on. Like it's that's it, is it? And you're in it. You're like
yeah. No, I loved it. I mean, I also did like how steep. I loved how steep the races are. Like we don't have that as much in the US. I loved how a lot of the races are kind of like choose your own adventure, kind of like, finding your own line, like up and down. And I also liked how the races, there was like a good mix of like shorter and longer stuff. For better and for worse in the US, like the environmental protections are so great on the land. That's just really hard to just have a ton of races like that. And it's really hard to have races that like go, you have a race up and down Ben Nevis. There will never be a race up and down Mount Whitney, for better or for worse, no matter how epic that would be. It's just it's not ever going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I did really enjoy it. And like beyond just like the actual racing scene, I really liked the athletic clubs were like very cool. And I wish that was like a thing here. I mean, it is to some extent, there are running clubs and stuff, but having each kind of like town was cool. And then it was also nice to kind of like, people were much more willing to come out and support. Like getting support from my like 100-mile thing in June in New Hampshire was like, pulling fucking teeth. And like part of that is because like the US is like more spread out and people got to drive way farther to come and support. And the other thing is, it's just like the culture of running just isn't as strong, and the culture of like aiding other people while running this stuff isn't quite as there. Whereas like I come to the UK, I'm like not even British, and like tons of people I have never even met come out. So
Yeah.
Did it surprise you? I mean, this is probably the most important question you're going to be asked of this entire interview. Did it surprise you how much of a focus they put on the fact that you ran it bare chested? Because that literally is almost like when in the different articles, it kind of leads with that, as though the record is secondary.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I did, if you look at like Mount Hood, because I ski Mount Hood for time and I skied it just in my underwear. And I mean, there was reasoning behind that. It was like about heat management and stuff. Like I did not do it as a stunt, but like 99.999% of the coverage, like way more than the bare chest. Like it's just like it's all people talked about for the Mount Hood thing, which was like kind of annoying, but like it's like whatever, a lot of people like don't understand the time, like an hour and 16 minutes or whatever at Mount Hood. It's like, like no idea what that means. Like even I don't understand it. Like I'll stand at the base and I'm like, hour 16 minutes to get to the top of this thing. It doesn't look fucking far. Like it takes that long. Like it's unless you've done it, it's like hard to like comprehend. But like obviously in the snow, no shirt on, in your underwear, like that is more accessible to everybody. So.
And then we've had a question from the podcast. What would you say would your tips be to people who want to get better at doing like long distance FKTs?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would do is I would run by myself and I would take my Strava and I'd put it on private because too many people get like too many weird pressures to like run too fast. Every group run almost that I've been on, to include the Keswick Athletic Club runs I went on, were like way too fast. Like people should really, if you don't have a good idea of like your heart rate zones, I would get a heart rate chest monitor. The wrist monitors are absolute fucking garbage. Get a chest monitor, like figure out your heart rate zones and just make sure you're always running aerobically, basically for 90% of your training. And then for the speed work, I do all my speed work on the incline treadmill and on the Stairmaster, and I think it's the only way to do it.
Oh, really?
So yeah.
On the Stairmaster, you do your speed work?
Yeah. I thought I was just doing. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I can you share a video next time you do it of what that looks? Just because I've never actually seen.
It's not very exciting right now. It's when I'm right now, I'm doing all my stuff is just weighted. I'm just doing like very long, not long, but like 1 hour to like 80-minute weighted sessions. Like like today was like an 80-pound pack on the Stairmaster. So it's like just someone walking on the fucking Stairmaster with a backpack on. But like when I would do my sessions for the Bob, I was running. I was running.
And why the pack now then? But the running for the Bob.
Part of it is just mentally kind of like mixing it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Part of this is it's not as quite as sport specific. It doesn't quite resemble. It's not. I don't think the carryover to running is as good as running unweighted, but there are really good training effects like to the musculature doing this like heavy weighted work on a steep incline. And so like the company that I coach for,
you can mention
like, yeah, Evoke Endurance like used to be part of Uphill Athlete, but like half the company split off. But like Scott Johnston, who does like all the training theory for Evoke, like he's like very into like steep weighted work with a pack to build kind of like fatigue resistance, what he calls muscular endurance in the legs, and just like better recruitment of like muscle in the legs for moving uphill. So during my off season, essentially, I do all just like weighted work on the Stairmaster. And then when I'm in season, I just do unweighted work on the Stairmaster on the incline treadmill.
And what do the gym members make of you?
The only thing I've ever gotten is like some people, one time I had a gym, like the staff was like following me around and eventually like confronted me, like because they thought I was stealing weights because I was putting all these weights into a backpack. Yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense, but.
Well, I mean, 80 kilograms is a shitload to put in a bag.
No, 80 pounds.
80 pounds. Yeah. But even so, that's a lot to put in a bag, even loose weights. Right. And well, and any other questions, Jody?
No. I just I haven't got anything. It was the bare chested thing that I just wanted to slip in there at the end. But yeah, that's there was actually just one more thing. With your FKTs, the Bosnian ones, were the Bosnian ones because you were stationed in Bosnia, or what was the thing behind that?
Yeah, I was stationed there.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
It's
so
good.
much.
It's good running there. Really good.
I don't know whether you, because sometimes like David here will go a long way. He'll travel to another country in order to, win a race, as he did to Somaliland. So I just didn't know whether it was the same kind of thing. There's absolutely no way anyone's going to take these Bosnian records. So
I checked Bosnia. I was going to lose. I checked Bosnia. I was going to get my ass kicked, so I carried on going.
Yeah. No, the running is very good there. Those routes that I did, I mean, I just tried to. There isn't like a huge culture of speed records, and so like I just like got with some local people, and I was like, hey, like what should have records in the country, and like that was the stuff. There was like 10 more routes that I could have done that I wanted to like put together a thing that had like a huge list of the best routes in Bosnia and everything, but I just kind of ran out of time and interest a little bit. But there's a ton of really good running there, a ton of really good, probably undeveloped sport climbing there. So yeah, it's a good spot. Yeah.
And if people listen to the podcast, can they train with you through Evoke if they want to kind of get more of
Yeah. So through Evoke, I do one-on-one coaching, and then I also do phone consultations. So like if people want to send me their Strava or their training peaks, I'll go through it, and then we can talk about their objectives or whatever thing. And
has Finlay been in touch and said you're already ahead of me on checking my Strava, but what's the advice?
Yeah. Me to Finlay?
Yeah. Has he been in touch saying
yeah.
What's the advice on that?
Yeah. Because and just also to say, if people just have like one-off training questions or something, they can just like message me on Instagram. But obviously for free. But Finlay and I were talking about a couple of things. We talked about speed work on the Stairmaster. So like in my Strava bio, I have a link to a Google Doc that has all my speed workouts in it. And so like Finlay we were kind of like talking about that. And he was also thinking about increasing his volume a little bit. And so we were just kind of discussing, what my kind of volume looks like.
And are there any records in the States you think he's going to come out and take down of yours?
I would love. I would absolutely love if you would come out and race here in the Northeast. Like there's a bunch of good ones. There are some that are very, very worthy routes, but the times are just not as fast. Like it would just be hard, I think, unless he came over here and he moved here for a couple months like I did. It would just be hard to come over and like scout a route once and then to do it and set the record. Like that would be really, really hard, like on the best routes. But there are routes that are very, very, very good, very quality, but just like haven't been as like the times just aren't tested. That next kind of like echelon. Yeah. I mean, he could totally come and break those times, but he would just have to commit to like doing like what I did in the UK.
Yeah. Well, maybe you will. Fingers crossed. You can switch continents and just a high five on the way back.
It would be great. No, I think it'd be so cool. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Jack. And congratulations on all the FKTs you've done so far. And if you make it through London and need a place to crash, let me know. I'll take you to my my local FKTs down the bum burner in Peckham.
Awesome. You can take me to John Albin's Strava, one of his Strava.
Yes, maybe. Oh my God, yes! We'll do a weekend, take them all off. That'd be incredible.
Yeah.
And if people want to follow you on Strava, on Strava or Instagram, what's your handle?
It's just my name, Jack Kuenzle. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, Jack, and hopefully see you at some point in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Man. Thank you.
It's amazing, isn't it? What I find incredible is he's just got no doubt that he just wants to go and smash these FKTs. And I don't think there are that many runners who have. Most people need almost the verification or the motivation of racing individuals or crowds or glory or raising medals or sponsorship or money but he's just going out there to be the best in 50 years' time.
To be fair, we've talked about FKTs and I think right at the start, actually, we derided them somewhat. But actually, as a kind of a rationale for FKTs, he's presented that in a different way than I've ever heard anyone talk about before, about, going and mastering a route. And you think, actually, that's a really nice way of putting it. Like, obviously got to choose the right route. I mean, the idea of picking something like the Monarch's Way and mastering that must be awful. But the idea of like really like really getting under the skin of a route. And I mean, that's just got to be the type of person you are.
Yeah,
that's it. Whereas I think some people just like, like you say, want to go somewhere, want to be somewhere that, is probably different from where they are, training it a few times and then, have the race and, don't feel as connected to it as someone who like really kind of, obsesses around the Bob Graham. And I think that is part of there wasn't really a backlash against Kilian and stuff doing the Bob Graham, but there was that kind of sense that there was that disconnect.
Yeah, he was a tourist.
He's a tourist. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And but I love the preparation,
the level of stalking.
The level of stalking. I mean, this is kind of your level of stalking, isn't it? It's like
right. I'm
really
proud of him. I'm proud of him.
And I absolutely love the fact that he called out. He goes that we have a bigger history of cheating.
So, well, I guess they probably know their most famous cheat is Rob Yum coming over here, cheating over there. So even their biggest American cheat was British. And you're like, oh yeah,
amazing.
Good point.
Amazing.
Right. I discussed this further, but I need the toilet. So I am going to say, D-Banners, thanks so much for listening to this. And thank you so much to Jack for coming on. If you like this episode, you could go all the way back to the beginning when we spoke to James Appleton, who first introduced us to almost the culture.
Famous photographer.
Yeah. Indeed. He talked us through the culture. Then we spoke to Nikki Spinks, who was then talking about doing the single, the double of the Bob and all the various rounds. We spoke to Jasmine Paris, who then smashed the record. Then we spoke to Beth Pascal, who smashed the record. We haven't spoken to Kilian yet. Although we've texted Kilian and we tell you about our text with him, which is almost the same. So those episodes.
I love it. If he hadn't been texting you, you just making it up. That was just.
And he also said, "You fucker, get away from my records! How dare you? Back down now." But any other? I guess I've stolen all the obvious ones. But any others you throw into the mix along those lines? I mean, we spoke to Ryan Atkins as well about his FKTs and him setting the record for.
We covered. Do you know what? With that interview, we've covered quite a lot of stuff, really, in terms of the things that we've touched on before, but being pulled together in a slightly different way. But yeah, I think you've hit the
But even speaking to Josh before about being in the army and him going into ultra and talking about his time in Iraq and being not the hunter. What are the American guys? So the army
Rangers,
being a ranger. Yeah, that was really, really insightful. And in fact, there's so many good interviews in our back catalogue on this subject. So go and explore. Thanks for listening. If there's any people you'd like us to interview in particular, then message me, david@badboyrun.com, or any topics or any things along those lines. Do leave us a lovely review. And the theme of today's review, what will the magic word be? Tranter banter. Or
Tranter banter.
Yeah, Tranter banter or stalking Finley would be good. Talk about stalking Finley's Strava. If you get those into Finley.
Stalking Finley sounds like a Booker Prize winning
it does
novel, doesn't it?
Yeah. Stalking Finley to find yourself. So try and get those in a review title, and we'll read it out on the podcast. And Jody, anything thrown into the lovely mix of the
If you want to join the conversation, please go over to Facebook, type in Bad Boy Podcast, answer 3 questions, and you can join the group there. If you want to buy a nice gift for a do-badder in your life, I have no suggestions whatsoever to tell you.
And if you go in the shop, the merch is such that do-badders will love it, and the people you buy them for will hate it. So it'd be funny whoever you buy it for. So
it'll be perfect, and you'll get it. You give it to someone that you're close to, you'll get it back very quickly.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Fuck you, buddy.